I'm a computer science professor. I was in industry as a software engineer. I care a lot about tech, and I think we need more of it in our schools. And certainly my area of tech, which is AI, is a hot topic right now. So it seemed like a really good opportunity to do something for the school district that I attended for elementary school and middle school and high school. So what I thought would sort of just be a fun experience ended up this multi-year thing and meeting great people and doing good stuff.
So tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so what can I say? Southern California, born and bred. My family actually came to Lakewood in the 1950s. That's where my uncle started his restaurant, Mano's Italian Restaurant, for anyone who might have been in Lakewood long enough to remember. And
What is it?
Mano's Italian Restaurant used to be off of South and Bellflower. It's where Joe's Sushi is now, over by In-N-Out. So he owned that restaurant for 30 plus years, and so that was sort of the way that the family came to be in Lakewood. He started the restaurant, and everyone came to work at the restaurant.
How do you say it again? Is it
Mano's?
Mano's?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I was born in Lakewood and attended Lindstrom Elementary and Mayfair Middle, Mayfair High School, and then from there went off to university, and I figured out relatively early that I liked technology. Of course, computing back then was very, very different, and AI certainly wasn't part of the conversation, but found computer science and really loved it and got into that, and so never really got out of it. So my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD, all in computer science, and then during my master's at Stanford, I discovered artificial intelligence and just thought it was the coolest thing ever. Of course.
When was that?
Oh,
when
this
did
was
you get into
this was early 2000s. I'd say I knew I wanted to do AI probably around 2002. I took a class and just thought this is just the coolest stuff I've ever seen.
Now, what was happening in AI in 2002?
Not a whole heck of a lot. AI, the term is sort of coined in the 1950s, 1956. There's a lot of overpromising and under-delivering. There's some cool stuff done, but there's some AI winters too. And at the time, everyone thought, it's a neat academic subject, but there weren't really a lot of folks saying this is the way to go. In fact, I'd finished up at Stanford and I started working at Boeing, and I had told my manager at the time, I'm going to go back and I'm going to study artificial intelligence. I want to do my PhD. And the response is, well, that's great. It's really fascinating, but you'll never really be able to make a living doing that. No one really is excited about it. And now flash forward 20 years, and everyone's talking about artificial intelligence.
Right. It's definitely the underwater basket weaving. Yeah.
It's funny. I joke with my friends that I'm pretty much the most uncool person you'd ever hope to meet, but now I'm enjoying my 15 minutes because I can be at TGI Fridays eating boneless buffalo wings, and the folks next to me are talking about something they've heard with artificial intelligence, right? So I'm cool. I finally did something that people think is neat. I'm a professor of computer science, but my area is artificial intelligence and machine learning, and I'm a senior associate dean over there in the Fowler School of Engineering. I've been at Chapman teaching in one capacity or another most of my adult life, and I think this is my 22nd year. And it's been really fun to sort of see how computing has evolved from when I first stepped in the classroom in 2003, and how ubiquitous it's becoming, and or how ubiquitous it became, and then even now how ubiquitous artificial intelligence is, and how now it's getting moved into everything that we do.
Right. What are the AI tools that when it comes to noobs who are getting into it, especially like kids that are wanting to really get into it, what are those?
Yeah, I think that right now the no-brainer answer is anything related to large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini or Azure OpenAI, anything like that, right? I think that for those of us that are around to sort of remember the internet coming of age and sort of coming into the homes, probably one of the most important skills that we learned, was how to effectively search for things on Google, right? I mean, that was really, if you figured out how to hone your search queries so you could get the results you wanted, that was a huge productivity boost, whether you're doing that for school or whether you're doing that for work or anything else. And now I think we're seeing the same thing with large language models like ChatGPT with prompt engineering, knowing how you interact with an AI and say, here is what I'm trying to find out. Now let me help you get me to where I need to be, right? And knowing how to formulate and understanding the context of the different prompts, so you can get to the answer that you want more quickly and have more confidence that it's actually right. I really think that prompt engineering with large language models, this is a skill now that I mean, really, it's almost today is the day, but very shortly we're going to see this as a requirement to do pretty much every type of office job, right? Just like now people say, if you want to work for us, you have to be able to use Microsoft Outlook and Excel and Word and all of that, or the Google Suite. People are going to say you need to effectively be able to engineer prompts for ChatGPT.
So explain what, like I know what it is, but explain what like engineering is.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest sort of analogy for something like a large language model is sort of interactive dialogue back and forth, question answering. I go to ChatGPT and I say something like, tell me about some really important papers in artificial intelligence over the last 3 years, and it comes back and it gives me some things like, but I'm really interested in large language models, and it comes back and it gives me something. I go, okay, well that's good, but there's a lot of the internet's the internet. There's a lot of gibberish out there, but I want you to hone that down what you're telling me. So it's really very reputable papers and good journals and good outlets. So I know that what I'm reading is legitimate, and so it's sort of that interactive refinement of here's what I'm looking for, here's what you're giving me, let me get better information.
There's so many times that I'll use AI, and I use it on a daily basis. I learn through asking the questions in the rabbit hole of actually digging in, rather than just getting some easy answer.
And I think that entire process, in addition to getting the answer that you want for whatever it is you're trying to learn, I mean, I think that entire process is sort of teaching you this algorithmic thinking toward problem solving, right? Taking a big problem, breaking it into smaller pieces, and then assembling the results so you actually solve the problem. So I think it's useful. And people get up in arms and, oh man, you're talking about ChatGPT and you're talking about education and the kids are going to use it just to write their term papers and do this and that. And I think that as educators, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our students understand the importance of intellectual honesty and academic honesty and the importance of attribution and all that. And I think that's true no matter what, right? That was true when Google became a thing, and that was true when Wikipedia became a thing, and that's true now.
A lot of similarities.
A lot of similarities. So, to me, sure, generative AI and ChatGPT and large language models, it's disruptive, but we've seen disruptive technologies before, right? In the early 70s, when Hewlett Packard came out with a scientific calculator, a bunch of folks said, now no one can learn anymore because they're not using a slide rule. And then in the mid 80s, when they came out with a graphing calculator, it's like, now you're not going to be able to do that because it just wants stuff for you. TI-89 and stuff like that. Did that happen? No. I mean, it's not like people stopped learning math because we handed them a graphing calculator. It makes it easier to do more complicated math more quickly, and I think that's the way I look at ChatGPT. In a lot of cases, it's a productivity multiplier if you use it correctly. And still there's a lot of intelligence required, being able to parse the results that come back and knowing what's good, what's not so good, what's completely fabricated. We call those hallucinations. And being able to understand that. So I don't think we should be teaching our kids or students to go on autopilot and just use this technology. I think we should teach them how to use it properly so they can be more effective human beings in school, in work, in life. But long before things like large language models, people were using analytics to be able to say, this is what the next hits should sound like, or what this next movie trailer should look like. So human beings are good at finding patterns in data and then altering their behavior to fit that pattern, right? That's just what we do. And I think in a lot of cases, one of the ways that we do better than machines is that we can reason under uncertainty a lot more quickly. We're used to sort of that. So it's scary in a lot of ways. I
mean, it's the fear, right?
And now they're saying in the next few years we're going to have artificial general intelligence, and after that there's going to be artificial super intelligence, and you know, obviously it's going to be important that we put guardrails on things, and I think that learning how to when to trust AI and when not to trust AI is going to be important. Obviously, there are lots of ethical issues that go into building AI systems and models that really need to be fleshed out, and there's a lot of smart people that are working on that, and there's going to be policies that come and go and continue to get vetted, and that's all important. But I don't think we're putting the genie back in the bottle. I think it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. It's here to stay, and so I think we just need to figure out how to use it effectively as individuals, as citizens, society, and obviously there's a fear. Well, is this going to put people out of work? As a computer science professor, I get this a lot. I talk to families and they say, oh, well, now you just jump on line and you interact with an LLM and you tell it what code that what you want to solve, and then it spits out the code in Python or Java or whatever language you want. It just writes code for you. So is it the case that computer scientists are out of work? Should I not major in computer science or software engineering? No, absolutely not, right? I think this is just a tool that's going to make us more effective.
Yeah.
And the fact that for me, I can, let's say in my research, the fact that I can offload a large part of my day where I'd be writing code, and I can offload that to AI so that I can be focusing on other things, reading papers and learning new things and focusing on different projects that maybe, it wasn't on my calendar to get to for another year. It was something that was important to me, but I just didn't have the time. Now I can do more things and focus more on the things that I want to do and less on the mundane. And so I think that's, I think that's really important. And I think, in my mind, this is how we're going to continue to see AI evolve. Getting back to sort of the internet analogy, one thing that I definitely think is true is back when, the internet was coming into the homes and even if we want to talk about dial-up, but certainly when we start talking to broadband, everyone talked about the digital divide, right? Who has access to the internet and who doesn't? And the new digital divide is really who's going to have access to artificial intelligence and who's not going to.
Why would people not have access?
If you look at a lot of the really awesome tools that are out there, there's a lot of free versions, but then there's premium versions that you can do more features, more access, and
that makes sense.
Yeah,
my daughter's always trying to get on my OpenAI account.
Yeah,
because you could just do more.
You can just do more, right? I mean, similarly, back in the day, I had always had dial-up internet at home until I moved away to Stanford, and of course, in the dorms we had really fast,
DSL
internet, and it wasn't DSL, but I mean it was a really fast wired network, and I mean it was just unbelievable, right? The speed at which I could get stuff done compared to having to dial in and wait forever, file upload, file download. It was night and day. And I can remember when I finished and I had moved back home to my parents' house in Lakewood and was looking for a job and waiting to get set up, and it was like the first thing I did when I moved home. I was like, all right, like we're getting DSL. I'm paying for DSL because there's just no way I can go back to dial-up. It's right. Just I can't do the work that I want to do on this, and now I'm starting to feel the same way about AI. It's become so much of what I do as a person working in AI that I went from the free version of ChatGPT to the $20 a month version of ChatGPT, and now I'm paying $200 a month for their pro version crazy. Because that's the degree to which I use it all the time.
Yeah, they really get you with like the credits, like they call them credits. There's a couple that I use. I'll use like Runway, and like, dude, they just eat up all those credits, and like especially when you're trying to create something. It might take you like
the experimentation.
10, 15 different times.
Yeah. But policies we develop and what we embed in curriculum and how we evolve our curriculum so that as early as possible, kids are getting access to this and understanding how to use it effectively, how to use it safely, and understand the limitations, of course.
Right. What's the most exciting part about your job?
Oh, geez. Well, I think being a professor is really, unique because there's so much intellectual freedom. And so for me, I'm a computer scientist by training, but the way that I sort of became, the full blown professor that did research and had a lab was my daughter was diagnosed with autism, and I tell folks that I I had always felt that I had sort of like nailed my career path as a computer scientist. It just fits with the way that my mind works, and it excited me. And I had so much fun getting my PhD, and that was just so cool. But when my daughter got diagnosed, I was like, man, I have this doctorate in AI, and if I had studied psychology, or if I had been a neurologist or an MD or something like this, I could actually help my kid. And then I started looking, and I realized there were some really interesting opportunities to sort of apply artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is my area, in the autism space. And so, I did that. I was working at Boeing at the time, and just told my wife, I think I'm going to leave Boeing, and I'm going to go and sort of do the academic thing full time. And that's what's so great about my job. You can do that, and you can say, I have this idea, and I think that I can produce, and I think I can do work that's meaningful, and you have the freedom to do it. And you actually have the freedom to fail at it, a little bit too. There's a lot of innovation that comes out of failure. So that's, I think, probably the best part of my job is the intellectual freedom. And right up there with that is also the ability to be in a classroom and be around students and train the next generation. That's really exciting now that I've been teaching for 22 years. Just seeing now what some of my students have gotten up to since they've graduated makes it worth getting up in the morning.
Yeah. Well, what's the most interesting thing you've done with AI?
Well, I'll tell you, so I'll give you two answers. I'll give you sort of in my mind, what's the most impactful thing that I've done or been a part of it, and then I'll tell you, what I think, maybe is the coolest, showiest. So, most impactful is I had a really great collaboration with Dennis Dixon, who works in behavior analysis and really has dedicated his life to helping kids on the spectrum. And we got together and we decided that we really wanted to try and unlock sort of the different types of autism that are on the spectrum, right? And these days when we give a diagnosis, we say autism spectrum disorder. That's it. We don't talk about Asperger's anymore. We don't talk about autistic disorder. It's just autism spectrum disorder. And so we wanted to know, can we look at data and start to understand, sort of on that spectrum, what are different types of profiles, and then how do each of those different types of profiles respond to different intervention intensities and things like that. With sort of the idea of if you have a kiddo and they're in 40 hours a week, let's say, of therapy. Well, if it turns out they're going to do just as well on 30 hours a week of therapy, then why not give them 10 hours back so they can just be a kid, right? And so we worked on that, and we got a couple of papers out that really sort of...
How do you measure that? Because what kind of therapy?
Applied behavior analysis that's one of the things too that we're looking. You talk about personalized medicine. You're really understanding for who the individual is and the resources that they have to bring to bear on their situation. What can we reasonably expect from them in terms of improvement, right? And so we had done that, and we wrote a couple of, I think, really nice papers on the relationship between treatment duration and intensity and how that led to outcomes. And then we wrote a really cool paper together on sort of the different skills profiles within the autism spectrum that we saw. And a couple of those papers have been used by the larger insurance companies to sort of inform their funding models for kiddos. And so, to me, that's probably the most impactful work that I've done. I feel really good about that. It was a little bit crazy when I said, okay, I'm going to leave this great industry job to go and be a professor, because I think I can use AI and machine learning in a good way for to help in the autism space. And so when that happened, it was sort of like cool. It was it was a good move. It was time well spent.
Where when you write papers, where do they get distributed? You said like the insurance company will use them.
Yeah, I mean, so usually we target academic journals, and there's for different areas you find sort of the journals that are the most reputable, that have the readership that is going to be interested in the science that you're putting out there, and then and then the insurance companies of course have clinicians and have researchers that are looking at this and trying to say, okay, cool, which of this research can help us sort of do our job better. So we'd publish these journal papers, and then they ended up getting cited by the insurance companies, a few of them for their funding models, which was really satisfying. I think probably more important, and this gets back to the selfish part of it, I think probably more important is it gave me some sense of control, right? As a father who happens to be good at computer science, right? That's the I guess the one thing that I really have ever excelled at. Being able to say, okay, well, let me do this thing to try and help my daughter and kids like her. That's probably been what I've gotten out of it the most. But yeah, it's also been interesting because obviously working with the data that we work on and gaining some insights into that. It's interesting that in my personal life to sort of see these things that correlate. And it's like, oh, that's something that we had talked about, let's say a year ago, in this data that we were looking at. I am now seeing manifested in sort of my daughter's day to day. So you have those moments, but I think mostly for me, it's been nice to go to this place of, crap, my daughter just got diagnosed. Now this word autism is going to be bouncing around my brain pretty much all day, every day for the rest of my life. So how do I have some sort of synergy between home life and what I do to pay the bills? So much time crying and worrying about what's going to happen when you're not around anymore and that type of stuff. And then finally it's like, I got to do something. And so that's what I did. And it ended up being, most of my career, most of all the really good stuff has really worked out to just being happy accidents, right? And that's one of those things that just worked out. But in terms of sort of the kind of like coolest thing I've ever done with AI is during the pandemic. One of my colleagues, Grace Fong, she's a world-renowned concert pianist. I mean, just absolutely brilliant pianist. But we started chatting. I think the discussion started because I had emailed her and said, hey, we've never actually met, but I know how amazing you are, and my daughter is interested in learning piano. Do you have anyone that you would recommend that works with kids on the spectrum, sort of adaptive music lessons and things like that? And so we'd exchanged some emails, and then I had a student that was like, you're talking with Grace. She's such an amazing musician. Wouldn't it be cool if we could use artificial intelligence to sort of do something with music? And sort of the idea that we had is, well, what if we could take piano compositions and turn them into moving pieces of art for the hearing impaired? And then what if we could take pieces of art and turn it into piano compositions for the visually impaired? And
nice.
And so we reached out to Grace and we sort of said, look, here's what we want to do. And she was like, well, as it turns out, I'm not going anywhere because of the pandemic, right? So all my concerts I have scheduled have sort of fallen by the wayside. And so we spent a year working on that and got some really neat results. And to me that was the coolest because I do not have a creative bone in my body, right? I do not play an instrument. Big regret of mine. I cannot draw. Just not the way that my brain works. Give me math, I can do math, I can write code, but I can't do any of the creative stuff. So I'm like, wow, like what a crazy world, what a great job I have. Now I'm like, my job is I'm getting to collaborate with this really amazing concert pianist who goes and like plays like Carnegie Hall, right? And now we're working on something involving AI. It was funny because Grace doesn't have a technical background at all, and so it was really my PhD student Rao Ali, who was sort of the intermediary, right? That knew enough music where he could talk to Grace, and of course, he was working closely with me on the tech side, so he spoke AI ML fluently, and it's like between the three of us trying stuff and sort of rinse and repeat, we got to something. We're like, oh, this is really cool. So I mean, and this was sort of all. Like I said, around the pandemic. So this is a couple years shy of the big Gen AI stuff that we're seeing now, right, like Dolly and things like that. So that wasn't really happening.
Is that correlated? Do you think people were just like the big wave of AI as people had more time to just sit in front of their computer and figure it out?
No, I think it's more a matter of the perfect storm of faster hardware acceleration with GPUs, plus better algorithms in architectures, plus the ability, obviously the internet has sort of changed our ability to the scale that we collect data, right? And of course, our smartphones and everything else, everyone's connected, so everyone's producing data all the time, everyone's consuming data all the time. So I think it's just sort of the perfect storm of things happening. That being said, if you would have told me in 2020 that we'd be having a discussion that I'd be seeing artificial general intelligence in my lifetime, I would have said no. General intelligence is sort of this idea that you can build an AI that has the ability to sort of function and reason on the level of a human in terms of the breadth of the things that they can do,
Is
right?
it same thing as like becoming self-aware?
I don't think I don't think the like sentience or intention or self-awareness factors into it, but it's more this idea of as opposed to training an AI system to do something really well, I'm going to train an AI system to be able to tell me how toxic, right, a chemical is, or I'm going to train an AI system that's going to tell me whether or not I think someone's going to be a credit risk if I give them a credit card. Rather than sort of training those specialists, you have an AI system that's just able to just be a generalist in terms of everything and learn and improve. And then of course beyond that you have artificial super intelligences where now you have an AI that can really outperform and know and do things that a human can't do.
That's kind of where I see things going, even with like when people generally will use like ChatGPT to like for a specific task, like give it the prompt and take the output, and that's kind of the end of it. But like when I started making my own GPTs in ChatGPT, and now it's like it's taking information from even like past things and like kind of like building out like sometimes I'll have it do something and it will reference it like from the information from a prompt 3 months ago, and even Notebook LM, I've been using that a lot. It's
also
amazing.
Really amazing.
So what I did with Notebook LM was I downloaded all of the transcripts of every board meeting and I uploaded it to Notebook, and now when I have a question, I think the plan I'm at, you can only do like 20 documents, but I'm sure I can figure out how to squeeze more in there. But it's great because I can say like, hey, anytime security was brought up at the district, it'll tell me like with references like to each time, and it's so powerful and so like it. I used to have to like flip through all of my minutes and like go through all my board books. It just, I don't know, man. Like it like the possibilities of that is great.
No, I agree, and I mean again, it's this paradigm shift where it used to be let's search the data, right, and now it's you can interrogate the data. No, I want to know this, and I don't buy that. Why are you telling me that? Explain your reasoning to me, or you're not understanding me. My wife's a high school English teacher, and she's done some really fun assignments where she'll have students read the classic books, but then use something like a chat GPT to say, okay, well now let's look at this passage or whatever, and now let's think about what it would sound like if it were coming from the other character's perspective, right? Mm-hmm. And you can do that. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And I think that then people are like, oh well, you have to watch out for hallucinations, and sometimes it can spout gibberish, and absolutely true, right? I mean, there are limitations. So can people. So can people. I totally agree. But the other thing that's interesting is sometimes those hallucinations, not often, but sometimes those hallucinations are actually exposing gaps in human knowledge, right? It turns out we don't know everything either. And sometimes when the AI hallucinates, it's actually telling us something that's valuable. It's not just gibberish. That's, I think, getting back to why it's such a valuable skill to have and why it needs to be taught early and reinforced often.
So what do you think, are other districts, other schools, like in the K through 12, are they any of them doing something like novel that you think is a good aim?
Well, I think, I guess it's not novel in the sense that it's sort of the no-brainer. But I mean, I think that the districts that are having the discussions of how do we make sure that our teachers and our students actually have access to robust versions of this technology. I think that's a really important
So like
thing.
just like offering like the subscriptions
Yeah,
or whatever to all the students.
absolutely. You know, I mean, I think now, you know, a lot of school districts, oh, you know, we have a Chromebook for
Right.
every student. And
Right.
that's great, huge, you know, wonderful. But you know, now the thing is, how do we make sure that every student has access to these models to do their work, to do their learning, to do their research? During the pandemic, right? It's like, oh, you don't have internet at home. We're going to get you a hotspot so you can be able
Right.
to jump on Zoom and do your classes and do all the stuff online in Google Classroom or Canvas or something like that. Now I think it's going to be the same thing. You know, how do we make sure that our students have access to these really premium services? Because the students that do,
Well, I think that's the hard part, right? Because I've thought about that. Like a lot of the real time or like open source, like ChatGPT and OpenAI, like these really big ones. But I know I've watched presentations and met with the guy from the Khan Academy.
yeah,
And are you familiar with that? So like it sounds like they're doing really great work, and it's more education based. And I used it for a while, but I don't know how those add up to or size up to like a real open source like ChatGPT.
yeah, and you know, and open source is great. Or you know, I think, you know, really when we're talking about like the GPTs, we're talking about open weights, right? How can, you know, you recreate the model under the hood?
Right.
But but you know, I don't. You know, I think the problem with a lot of that is then you have to think about the computational infrastructure to do that, and
Right.
most school districts, you know, I would say that you know, they have the sort of the base infrastructure they need to operate, right, but they're not flush with extra compute, where now they're going to say, okay, well, you know, no problem, we're going to have a high performance computing center. So you know, so then that means that they have to go to the cloud, and then at that point that you're going to the cloud, then there's just lots of providers that can provide, you know, these large language models and things like that. So I think there are cost efficient ways to do it, but I think there has to be a realization that this is something that we need to do and that we ought to be doing. And you know, again, it's still it's easy for me to say. I mean, I'm an AI professor. That's what I do every day.
Right.
A lot of people are still really queasy about the technology.
Right. A little bias maybe.
A little bit of bias and a little, you know, obviously a lot of
A little bit of common sense too.
a lot of yeah, well, I mean, but even the naysayers, I think a lot of it's coming from an uncertainty standpoint, and
Well, it's also there's a fear, right? So I know like the Khan Academy, like the AI tutoring, like where it'll actually pick up on how students answer questions, like pick up like the like similarities, the basically like really define what it is they're actually struggling with, rather
Right.
than just focus on question number 6. It's more why.
yeah, it's much more adaptive.
Yeah, and it's amazing. But I would imagine, like, for teachers who may not be up to speed with AI, or people that offer services, it really has an opportunity. If they're using it, I think they should. Like that's one thing. But if the students are getting it directly around them, I'm sure there's I'm sure that's part of the reason it kind of isn't as openly accepted right off the bat.
Yeah, and you know, again, I think that that, and this gets back to, if we want to talk about training and education, then obviously we have to provide the training and education to the teachers as well. You know, I think to the casual user that hasn't had a need or hasn't taken the time to understand the power of these tools, for all intents and purposes, I mean, again, it looks like Wikipedia, like, oh geez, now my students just go to Wikipedia and they copy and paste, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even take the URL off the bottom of the paper when they submit it in. And so they see it as this problem because people are going to take a shortcut. And obviously, you know, I think there's a lot more to it than that. For the folks that really want to use it as the tool the way that it was meant to be used, then it's going to make them more effective learners, more effective, getting back to like Notebook or whatever, you know, the fact that you can take content and then produce basically a podcast
Right.
from it, right? I mean, that's huge. I mean, especially, you know, if you have students that maybe balk at having to sit and sort of read, right? Then you can have this format that you can listen to, and it's a little bit different and maybe a little bit more engaging, and that's super cool. This all sort of came about in 2022. So we're still very much near the beginning of this. Who knows what it's going to look like in 5 years? But like I said, I've seen more happen in, let's say, the last 3 years than I saw happen the 20 years that preceded that. And I can't imagine, some of my colleagues that have been in the field even longer than I have, how they feel. So to me, the most interesting thing about DeepSeek is the fact that the mere claim that they did what they did, shaved a cool trillion off the stock market, right? Because everyone panicked. I think if you actually look at the paper,
lost some.
if you, but I think that's another great point, and another reason why we need to do a better job just in general of sort of educating people about artificial intelligence and what's in the realm of the possible and what isn't, right? And I think DeepSeek at face value, it's really revolutionary. They're saying they can do this for a few $1 million, and but then you read the research, and there's a lot of stuff that's not there, right? Like, what did it take to get to that point? How much money was put into it? How much free electricity were you getting? How much free cooling were you getting? All of that. If you have to pay for it, costs money. So what did the $5 or $6 million go toward compared to having to do it from scratch? And of course the big question is, and I have no particular loyalty or affinity to OpenAI, but there's probably good reason to believe that they took an OpenAI model that's out there and distilled that down into DeepSeek. So there's a group saying that they've been able to produce something that's relatively competitive with DeepSeek for $30, right? They're sort of tongue in cheek. Yeah, I mean, I think those are all issues that you need to think about. But yeah, I think. But again, to me, the most fascinating thing was everyone who's investing so heavily in AI and they're excited about it and they're buying into the hype or whatever. It's just like this breath of look what these folks did for $5 or $6 million, and it was like sell, and that's I think the fact that it was so volatile for me means that people need to sort of again get more education on sort of what's going on in AI and how did we get here, and I think why now? Why is it that in 2025 we're seeing this happen? Why didn't it happen 10 years earlier? I think the history and the context is really it's really important. But it's not going away. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And I think getting back to your point, how do we know that if we're making an investment that we're not getting taken for a ride? And
that's with anything too.
With anything, but I think with AI systems in particular is they're so cross-cutting, right? Because the software and the hardware, whatever that you need to do this, the enterprise solutions that you need to do this, they're going to touch, obviously IT. They're going to touch operations. They're going to touch like people and HR. This is going to be something that's integrated into all these different functions. And so I think, to me, my personal opinion is there needs to be someone in these organizations, whether we're talking about a university or whether we're talking about a school district, that has the technical background to really understand what's going on. And everyone sort of giggled a few years ago when people started talking about chief AI officers, right? Like, oh, is this just folks that want to show that they're serious about AI, so they're appointing these roles? But I think there's a lot of good reason to have someone that kind of has that ownership of AI for an organization. Because it is so cross-cutting and because it touches everything, you can't silo it. And general counsel wants to look at AI through the liability lens only. And when ChatGPT became a thing, how many companies immediately were like, just don't use it, just don't ever touch ChatGPT, don't ever touch generative AI, right? Which is silly. That's not gonna. Sure, you can lock it down where people can't get to it from their work computer, and then they're gonna pull out their cell phone and they're gonna say, okay, how do I use ChatGPT? And so I think that having someone with the technical acumen that can, one, keep up with how fast it's evolving, and then two, be able to translate all the different needs from the organizations, or the different teams within an entity, and then be able to say, okay, how do we put that all together and actually build a solution that works, and then is actually modular enough and nimble enough where when the stuff evolves quickly, we can change it and not be locked into something that doesn't work for us anymore. I think that's going to be really important.
Is that role too specific? I know the college had a chief innovation officer. Is that kind of like is that more of like a wider umbrella for that, or is that?
I think everyone has different ideas of what a chief innovation officer does, and and I know places that we have a chief velocity officer, and all of that.
Chief what?
Velocity officer, right?
What is that?
To make sure that you're constantly like sort of like staying on your trajectory of greatness or whatever. So, okay. and honestly, I don't care what you call it, right? Call it whatever it is, but I think that there needs to be someone in these larger organizations that really, at the end of the day, they own AI, and it's on them. Because if you make these decisions in silos, right? If you say, oh, well, AI is related to computers, so the chief information officer, the chief technology officer, the chief data officer, they're going to own this by default. They will see it through that lens, and they're not going to see it through these different lenses. So right. I think that, someone someone really has to own it, whatever you want to call them. And it's necessary, but also scary. Obviously, folks with AI backgrounds right now, from a compensation perspective, they command a premium. So you're making a big investment in a person when you want to fill that role. But probably in the long run, it's still a lot cheaper than if you make an investment in the technology and you get it wrong. Right.
Right. Well, I think of it as like any investment in public education needs to translate into better outcomes.
Yep.
And there's a lot of investments that don't translate into better outcomes.
Yeah.
So when you think of technology and where we're at right now and how fast it's growing, I think the people that do invest in training and access and really adapting culture around an embrace of it, you're going to see the better outcomes with that. So, I mean, for what districts in general will invest in, just because it's part of past practices, or it's, kind of what all the districts do, especially when it comes to the grant money. Yeah, it's just like, it's sometimes I think it's like hard to spend it because you have to, and you end up just like getting these things because it's just like, okay, this is a safe investment, like it's covering these bases. But like, I think unless you're going to step out and really try something novel, or at least be near the front of tech and how things are moving, you're not going to see the gains in outcomes that you want. Yeah, like you have to adapt, and you have to be in front. I see other districts doing some pretty cool stuff. That's something I want for our district for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's something to move toward, and and the good news is, I don't think it has to be this all or nothing situation, right? You can build up to it, and I think.
So, what do you think the three small steps are?
In the context of a public school. I would say first small step is change the dialogue, so we're not just talking about generative AI and large language models and ChatGPT as these evil things that students are going to use to be lazy and cheat on assignments, right? Whether people want to hear it or not, again, the genie's not going back in the bottle. It's going to be a skill that's absolutely expected from an employment perspective. So rather than trying to police it or stay in the way of it, you gotta embrace it and just make sure that you're preparing, teaching people to use it in a smart way. I think that. I think the other thing too, starting by training teachers, even in just basic lexicon. Because now this is all becoming, part of the day-to-day. People are talking about ChatGPT. Well, okay, when you talk about ChatGPT, what does that mean? And, is that a large language model? How does a large language model relate to generative AI? What's the difference between AI and machine learning? Again, 20 years ago when I got into it, this is stuff that I'd just be talking about with my geeky friends, no one talked about machine learning, right? No one. I mean, if you saw a job ad that said machine learning in it, you'd jump up and down because you're like, they're looking for someone like me. And now everyone talks about AI and machine learning, nonstop. So I think sort of saying, okay, here's what the state of the art or the state of the possible is with where we are. Get everyone on a common vocabulary, get folks familiarized with at least the most pertinent tools for the job they're doing. I think that's number two. And then I think honestly the really kind of, I guess, obvious number three is getting back to this new digital divide and figuring out what model and what investment needs to be made so that students, sort of regardless of what their socioeconomic situation is, that they can all leverage AI fully. I mean, it's definitely a performance enhancer, right? When it comes to getting work done, you can offload so much stuff to it, and so the people that have it and the people that don't have it, there's going to be a drastic difference in the way that they're going to be going about their day to day, certainly in their academic endeavors. Obviously I think there is sort of this tremendous fear of missing out, right? And so you have folks that are sort of like, look at me, I know AI, I know AI, and even the, yeah. And well, I mean, you have some folks doing that really they're they can say the words, but in some cases they don't even necessarily know what the words mean, right? And so they're out there and the words are coming out of their mouth, right? But the words don't actually mean a whole heck of a lot. I think there's also, and this is true in higher education as well, and certainly in research, I call it the dog peeing in the woods phenomenon, right?
Okay.
It's like,
please explain.
If I say it first, then I'm the one that said it first. And so it doesn't matter if I know what I'm talking about or not, I said it. Then it's getting back to, cool, you can talk about the words, but you have to make people understand how it can actually be useful for their today, right?
You have to motivate people and inspire them.
And this is something that's not new to artificial intelligence. If you look at when artificial intelligence actually became a thing in the 50s, and you look at how much time was spent in the beginning just having these philosophical debates on what does it mean for a machine to be intelligent, right? Great conversations over a whiskey, to be sure. But while you're having those philosophical debates, there's actual work that could be getting done, right? And so, I've been involved in several things now where it's sort of, we're gonna put a tiger team together and we're gonna talk about and see if AI is really something we should be leaning into. And it's like, what are you talking about? I mean, just look, from a pure economic standpoint, of course, it's something you're going to be leaning into. What do you?
Right.
So yeah, I have been to many events and been sort of gotten my hopes up because I see something that's AI related, and then
do you kind of get get your nose in the air like you don't even know what you're doing.
No, not really. I mean, I think it's funny because we're for so long AI was over-promising and under-delivering, right? And now we're at a point where we can actually be over-delivering with so much of this stuff, and then in some ways people are under-promising just because they don't really know and they don't know how to communicate again what it can do for you in your job. And so I think that just getting someone to get with teachers and get with administrators and just level set and say this is what's fact, this is what's fiction, and here are some things where if you do this next week, next month, here's how your day-to-day can change.
Yeah, this is how many hours of your life you're going to get back.
Yeah, and this is how many hours of your life you're going to get back, right? I mean, it's there's really no reason now for an English teacher or language arts teacher to be spending any time looking to see if their student's paper was written in MLA formatting, right?
Right.
I mean, ChatGPT can do that for you.
Right.
Similarly for students, there's not a whole lot of reason why you should be painstakingly trying to Google search the exact correct MLA formatting for a particular reference type, right? ChatGPT will do it for you. So I think there's just a lot of stuff that you can offload and free up your time to do other things. It's a great time saver. And again, I think especially with these large language models and now not just searching data, but actually being able to interrogate data, the thought process, the kind of iterative refinement. I think that hones your critical thinking in important ways.
Yeah, I think what you just said, it makes me think of, if the lesson plan is the exact same as it was before AI, and I could see how the concern of, well, you just made those lesson plans, like there's less to gain out of that lesson plan because it did that. If the lesson plan doesn't factor in what AI can provide and ask tougher, deeper, more, it's not going to push students in that way. So I could see how, you could still plateau even with all the technology, because what we're asking and what students need to give more, because they have these tools, you're still plateauing when it comes to outcomes and just how much they're learning.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that gets back to, if ultimately being able to do some things with AI means that you get time back, then that means I think you have to reassess learning outcomes,
Right.
And how many high level learning outcomes and how many low level learning outcomes, and rebalance that, right?
Right.
I mean, and this gets back to, again, thinking about lame stuff like graphing calculators and whatnot. Cool. Now it's not uncommon for someone to graduate high school having taken calculus, right? I mean, maybe the equivalent of like 2 semesters of college calculus, depending on what your school offers. Is that really because people are so much smarter now than they were 40 years ago, 50 years ago? No, we just have a lot of really cool technology that help you get through that curriculum a little bit faster, and you can add
Right.
more curriculum to it.
Yeah, but I think it's like what you said. It's like when you back, what. Well, my camera's just shut off. Hold on. Oh, this one's still working.
No, that's good.
Yeah. What are you filling that time with, or is it just? So I think, like, I guess pull an analogy out of my butt here. Like if somebody just has like nails and a hammer, and you're having them do a task that's going to take forever, but then you give them a nail gun,
Yep.
the expectation has to change too. So it's almost like, okay, rather than it just being a one-way street, like, oh, this is the curriculum, this is what I have them do, and they have this extra tool, and it's just like all. No, it's like, okay, here's the nail gun, but now these are the extra things I need done.
I think everything absolutely evolves, and that can be a really good thing. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean that it's like the scary thing, right? I mean, of course, it's really
That's a
really
good
scary,
thing.
but yeah, but I mean, I think you get to push the envelope a little bit. And again, I think at the end of the day, it gets back to being able to integrate those tools in as early as possible for our students. That's going to give them a skill set that's going to translate to more career opportunities, better jobs, different types of jobs, and I think that's pretty awesome.
What is it that people don't know that where AI can be useful, like on a day to day?
Well, I think that that a lot of people aren't aware of how much of their day to day actually is interacting with AI, right? Because I mean, pre large language models and generative AI and all of that. I mean, there's some really great success stories. Obviously, like personalized recommendations. If when you log into your Netflix account and it tells you what you might enjoy watching based on what you watched previously, that's using some machine learning and pattern analysis, right? The fact that that Amazon will tell you that there might be a product that you'd like based on your previous purchases, that's certainly artificial intelligence and machine learning. Target got into some trouble a few years back because they were doing some predictive analytics, and they were sending mailers to people's houses saying, "Oh, congratulations, you're having a baby. Here's some stuff that you might need for the nursery." And of course, obviously, a huge breach of privacy for folks that didn't want people to know that they were expecting a child. And and the the quintessential example that we've been using when we teach artificial intelligence, or data mining, or whatever it is. The fact that when you walk into a grocery store, diapers and beer tend to be in close proximity to each other, right? That is done, with artificial intelligence and data mining and pattern recognition. So a lot of what we're doing is AI enabled. Certainly our self-driving cars are AI enabled, or maybe not even self-driving, but our surrounding aware cars are AI enabled. So there's that. If we really want to talk about areas where things have really been transformed with AI, I mean, medicine's a really great example. Medical imaging and our ability to detect things now because of computer vision and artificial intelligence algorithms. I mean, it's really already. People have a lot of strong opinions on big pharma, and rightfully so. But I mean, if you look at the way that we do pharmaceutical drug discovery now, the days of doing it all in a wet lab are over. You do it all computationally first. You find some promising targets, and then you go to wet lab, right? So many entire disciplines have become computational and data driven, and if you're data driven now, the next natural step is to bring AI into it. So I think all of this has happened. So now it seems very jolting, because in the last few years, I mean, in the last year, we're talking so much about what AI is doing to our day to day, but it's been happening for a while now. I think really the big thing now, though, if you were to come to me and be like, okay, well, why now, Eric? Why is everyone so excited? I'm like, well, because if you look at what ChatGPT and the large language models are doing, I mean, they are communicating with us in a natural language. Whereas before, if you wanted to really have, a meaningful understanding of artificial intelligence, or be sort of a power user of AI, it probably meant that you needed some degree of programming skill. It probably meant that you needed to have, some degree of comfort with calculus or statistics, right? Now you don't need that. Now you can talk to a machine the same way we're talking to each other, and it does a pretty damn good job of keeping up.
Sometimes,
the uncanny valley effect, right? Where it's like it's basically it's off-putting, and it freaks you out because it's human looking, but it's not human enough for you to buy it, right? So it's sort of the same thing. I mean, and that gets back to, as human beings, there are certain things that we can pick up on really well, right? I mean, we understand,
it's getting
what
good,
it is to be human. No, it's getting very good. And again, this gets back to what I've personally seen in the last 3 years is bigger than anything that I saw in the past 20 years before that. So, what's the next 3 years going to?
It's going to be
look
exciting.
like? I think so. I think it could be really good. Now, that being said, it's like all science, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you shouldn't stop and think about whether you should do it, and what's the responsible way of doing it, and what are the guardrails that you need to put around it. So I'm totally a proponent for all of that. You have to think about those issues, and certainly that's something that we need human beings to be thinking about and aligning it with our values and whatnot.
And also on a less existential thing, I oftentimes will you ever see the movie Click?
Oh yeah,
love Click. But sometimes I feel like that. Sometimes as a creative person, sometimes I will try to automate or kind of speed through a process that I used to enjoy.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm like, all right, even though I could do this like this way, like I actually enjoy kind of like free writing or, editing from scratch.
Yep.
So, I mean, you have to be cognizant of like the things that you do for productivity and information seeking, and then what you do if it provides you some type of psychic income.
Yep.
Right.
I totally agree. And I think that's even for me in writing code. I mean, there's things where it's just sort of, I'm looking to get something done. I need an automated solution or whatever, and so I go to Copilot and it writes some code for me, and we iterate back and forth, and then there are problems that I need to solve, where I need to have sort of a much deeper understanding of the structure of the problem. And so I write every single line of code. And I, think about the nuances, and I think about, maybe sort of what, I don't know, what the mathematical ramifications are of doing something one way or another, or the performance ramifications. And it's still very useful for me to do that. So, even just thinking from a writing code perspective, do I think that Copilot and ChatGPT are going to replace computer scientists, software engineers? No, absolutely not. But I do think that the ones that refuse to use the technology, right, are going to go by the wayside, because they won't be able to keep up with the folks that can use that that technology as a productivity multiplier.
Right. Those people are still writing cursive.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, yeah. My mother spent a lot of time in a boarding school in England. Of course, they had to do penmanship courses, and she is
get
mortified
that
when
calligraphy down.
when she sees her son's messy engineering block writing. She is like, what has become of society? Right? We are hopeless.
I had something dawned on me. So my dad's like a militant guy. Anyway, he writes in all capital letters. He has my entire life. It's just like he does it. And so for some reason, I picked it up and I write in all capital letters a lot of times. Just always yelling on paper. And then my daughter got like a report card, like an assessment, and that was one of the issues. And I'm sitting in like the meeting, and they're talking. Yeah, she has a hard time with like capital letters, and I'm like, hey, Donna, I'm like, that's my fault. Because when I write with her, like I'm just like writing. I'm like, oh yeah, you're not supposed to. Okay, all right, I'll adjust.
And I mean, and also real talk. I mean, from a work, career perspective, other than your signature, when's the last time that you handwrote a deliverable, right?
Right.
I cannot even tell you. And now most of the time my signature is, just in the doc I'm printing, right? It's not even a wet signature, but opportunity for inclusiveness and neuro inclusion and neurodiversity is huge. The accessibility component is huge. I think about when Hannah first got diagnosed and we had to take her through the IEP process, and how cumbersome and intimidating that was, and how much time it took, and and then thinking about families where they weren't in a position where they could take a day off of work and just hunker down at the kitchen table and get through it, right? Or and so I see AI as a way to, if you don't know how to fill out a form, it tells you how to fill out a form. If you need the form translated into some language that the district doesn't have, that does it. I think it's awesome.
You don't got to think about it and then like try to develop something, and then 6 months later you're still working on it. But it's similar to you. Like that's actually what got me involved in the district and ran for the board in the first place. Sitting through IEPs, and I remember there was one in particular where I couldn't shake the feeling of man, like this is difficult and time consuming. I think it was a really long one for me, and I have an amazing wife who's like, we're fortunate enough where she can be at home with the kids. She's like very administrative. She has all the paperwork. She's like ready to go. And it's still difficult. I think about like, what about like all the parents that can't do this for their kid? What about the parents that like don't even speak English and they got to go through all the same stuff? They don't know which questions to ask a lot of the times. They don't know their rights, and they don't know what they can ask for, what they should ask for. And then also just like depending on how much they're with their kids, like how much they know what their kids need as opposed to what somebody else is telling them.
I totally agree.
Yes, I mean, so that's why I got involved in the first place, was because it's like, all right, well, I can do this. I can be a voice, and a lot of stuff is what I've learned is like things are a lot harder to fix than I thought they would be, which I probably should have just known that, but it's still like it's still like a good aim, and always remembering like why you started something in the first place is all the motivation you need to keep going.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I think it gets back to my path has really just been sort of one happy accident after another, right? I had thought after high school I would go to the Air Force Academy and I wanted to be a career Air Force officer, and that didn't happen. And I ended up at Chapman as in undergrad and built relationships with professors that when I decided I wanted to go to grad school, they got me the types of letters I need to go to a place like Stanford, and that's when I found that I was really excited about AI. And even though in so many ways Hannah years later getting diagnosed with autism was really traumatic and really trying for for the family. The some of the work that I've done because of that sort of like fork in the road that life took me on, like I'm really proud of. I mean, I think that some of that is going to be my life's work. When I look back, I go, okay, cool. Like, whatever else I did as a scientist or whatever, that thing is pretty neat. I'm really proud of that. So, I think it's just interesting the things that happen if you keep your mind open and you're a little bit lucky being in the right place in the right time, and then getting out of your comfort zone and being a little bit fearless.
Yeah, I think it's the saying yes to opportunity. Like, always have an open mind, not being afraid to fail. Right, is a big one.
Things kind of work out.
They always work out.
Okay, right.
Yeah, even when they don't, they always work out.
Yeah. Curriculum when you're in any sort of public institution, right? There's a lot more rigidity, and you can't necessarily be as agile as just to say, oh well, so and so is around and available to teach artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, you name it, right? So now let's make that happen and squeeze it into the curriculum while we can take advantage of this person. And
it probably happens the other way, where there's really like a lack of expertise in the subject, and there's like, all right, hey, you're teaching this now, then they're actually gonna like learn. And that, I think there's like having industry experts is like a huge
and I can tell you that even at on the university side in higher education, there's certain courses that we know need to be taught by industry experts. A good example of this is some of our software engineering courses, because things are done a certain way in industry. Of course, students now are all about internships and experiential learning and hands-on type of stuff, and so it is an unmitigated disaster to take a newly minted PhD that's never actually been in the workforce and say, okay, now I'm going to teach you to teach this class how to do this stuff. Most of the folks in the class have one or two industry experiences under their belt, right? And they just sort of look at this and they're like, this is cool, like this is a nice academic exercise, but it's absolutely useless. So I think there's
many other factors.
Yeah, there's certain areas where you need an honest to God practitioner up there. The thing for me that I really value about CalApps is, and a weird thing coming from a college professor, right? But it's a much more holistic approach to education, not just sort of this everyone's going to go and get a 4-year degree, right? And that's the ticket to success. I mean, there's plenty of other paths that don't involve a 4-year degree that pay really well, much needed work, right? I oftentimes have told my daughter when we're commenting on different things, I was like, talk all you want about going and getting a bunch of graduate degrees and whatnot, but by the hour, my plumber and my mechanic make a lot more money than I do, right? And yeah.
Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
I know it's past your bedtime.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's only a little past midnight. I appreciate the patience with it. I don't know. I give myself a C- for the setup,
but an A when it comes to fun. So I think we've succeeded here.
I appreciate the conversation. We're gonna have more in the future, especially as I'm gonna have questions, because this is something that I want our district to go towards, and I want to make sure that we're listening to people that know what the heck they're doing when they're trying to do it, and not doing like what you said, where people it's almost like a virtue signaling thing, or like a just like okay, AI will do this and this, just to kind of like check those boxes. But you can do it, man. Like intentionality, do it right, do it big.
I agree. Well, this has been fun, and just holler anytime you want to continue the discussion.
I appreciate you, man. Oh wait, I almost forgot. You gotta sign it back.
Oh man, see, one of the few times I actually have to.
Let's see if you still know how to. You could use AI to do it, or you could do it. Or...
Oh, I got it. See?